Good morning and welcome to Across the Arts. I'm your host, Patrick D. McCoy, and on this special encore presentation of the Maestro series, we present this interview with the birthday boy. Happy birthday, Julian Wachner. As many of you all know, Julian Wachner was the former artistic director of the Washington Chorus for nearly 10 years. And on today, I'm revisiting this special interview that I had with Julian. As many people know, I have followed Julian's tenure with the Washington Chorus over that last 10 years, from his going to Trinity Church to become the director of music and arts there, to his many operas, and additionally his many choral performances. So let me just give you a little backdrop about this particular interview. This interview was surrounding the Candlelight Christmas Concerts that the Washington Chorus is well known for. As you know, they're about to celebrate their 60th anniversary, and Julian Wachner was certainly a very important part of that history. And so today I'm going to revisit this interview. Now, don't get jarred, because it does talk about Christmas, and it centers around Christmas, because that's definitely one of the major presentations of the Washington Chorus. So now I would like to play this interview and some more surprises in store at the end of this one. All right. Thank you so much.
Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. This is Patrick D. McCoy, the African American voice in classical music, and I welcome you to this anniversary edition of this show. As you know, last year around this time, we interviewed Julian Wachner, who is the music director of the Grammy Award-winning Washington Chorus. This morning, Mr. Wachner joins us again to commemorate the first anniversary of the show. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning, Patrick.
How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been an exciting time down here, so yes.
Thank you so much. Now, Julia, tell us about the Washington Chorus concerts that are coming up at the Kennedy Center as well as at the Music Center at Strathmore for the holiday season.
Well, it's I think we've really hit the and the word formula is maybe negative, but the programming methodology that really works for Christmas. And I think it bears upon, my years of experience as a church musician and then those years of working with the Boston Pops under the wonderful conductor Keith Lockhart and also John Williams. And then the 5 years of the CBC Christmas Sing-In we would do live from the Church of St. Andrew and St. Paul up in Montreal, which was a big sing-along that was broadcast live across Canada. So all those different things have influenced me in creating this program that mixes the familiar with the new, the fast with the slow, the loud with the soft, and we have lighting and candlelight and brass and huge choir singing. And it's just a wonderful feel-good show for the holidays.
Wonderful. Now, as the listeners just heard, we just were listening to your setting of "O Come All Ye Faithful," sung by the Washington Chorus on the latest Christmas CD, Christmas with the Washington Chorus, which was recorded at the Music Center at Strathmore. Now, who did you have?
Now, I have to correct you on. I have to correct you quickly on that because that is Richard Webster's arrangement. That's the only non-Wachner arrangement on the CD. But I think it's such a great arrangement. I didn't want to mess with it and make a new one. So it's funny. So the outer verses are Richard Webster, and the middle is the old David Wilcox with that wonderful descant. So and Richard Webster is a good colleague. He's the director of music at Trinity Copley Square in Boston.
Oh, thank you so much. At least I do. Right, I do have your setting of Joy to the World.
Yeah, which is a showstopper. One of the members of the NSO came up to me yesterday after our dress rehearsal and said, "Is that your arrangement of Joy to the World?" I said, "Boy, you just let it all out in that one."
And see, when you talk to friends, everybody can get a correction. So yes, so Richard Webster, that was his arrangement of "Oh Come All Ye Faithful," but we will hear Julian Wachner's setting of Joy to the World as we close the show. Now, tell me, what is going to be different about these concerts as opposed to the last year Candlelight Christmas Concerts by the Washington Chorus?
Well, I think one of the things that we're figuring out, and it's just like, why do people come back to Messiah year after year after year? Mm-hmm. We are not so much reinventing the wheel every year. We're building upon the successes of the past year. For instance, we get lots of feedback from our audience because, our wonderful executive director, Diane Petersing, does all these surveys. And, some of the feedback we got from last year is too many sing-alongs. We want to hear the choir more. So, we'll take something like that and finesse that into the programming so that, we'll maybe change how many times the audience stands up and sings versus how many times they listen to the chorus. But in terms of like the arrangements and how it's all organized and the fact that we always bring in a side by side high school chorus to join us, and having those young voices there. One of the wonderful features we have this year is that we have a young um, member of our junior Washington chorus, which is our educational program that you know, of course, because you got to spend an evening teaching them. Thank you for that, by the way.
Thank you.
And so you probably remember, actually, I'm not going to mention a name on air, I don't think, because she's under 18, but we have a wonderful young person who's singing the opening of the concert, sort of as emulating the treble sound of Once in Royal David City, just like King's College.
Mm.
And it's incredible that we're able to have such talent in our, junior educational program, that we're able to showcase that a little bit, just like we did with Michael Palmer, who got to conduct last year the Hallelujah Chorus. So
Now tell me, I wanted to know, I was thinking in terms of instrumentation, is it going to be with full orchestra, brass, and organ? Tell me a little bit about that.
sure. What we do is 4 trumpets, 3 trombones, tuba, French horn, 2 percussion, and organ. And most of my arrangements are created with that ensemble, because I think it's really important to create ensembles that create arrangements that can be done anywhere. So any church choir, with that has a little bit of budget for some brass, can say, "Oh, you know what? I heard these great, great arrangements in the Kennedy Center, and I don't need a full orchestra to pull them off." So even though most of my training came from my time working with the Boston Pops and that big orchestral sound, I've managed to figure out a way to get all that big sound into the organ, and then the brass punctuate. Actually, the brass is so virtuoso in terms of what they put into it, that you really get the sense that you're hearing a huge 80-piece orchestra.
Mm. Now, when you mentioned that piece about the budget, I'm sure that's something that hits everybody, even though wasn't something I plan to talk about. How does the Washington Chorus manage to, you have to have all these programs year after year, these major work season after season, whether it's a Mozart Requiem or a Mass or whatnot with orchestra. How do you all maintain that ability to do those kinds of work?
Well, I mean, most of that has to do with a really close, positive, creative tension of working with my executive director, Diane Peterson, and with this fabulous board. Our board is made up of some of the real best citizens of this region, and we just work really hard to make sure that we have a balanced budget. And I have to say, last year, when many of our colleague organizations were suffering greatly, we came out, a couple $100,000 in the black. And part of that is that, we decided last fall to not do a big Verdi program, but to do the Rachmaninoff Vespers. And that got us off on good footing in terms of cash flow. And then these Christmas concerts are nearly sold out, and that really helps. So it's a really careful combination of when we seek to do programming that is sort of altruistic or community oriented, meaning something like new music for a new age, where we know we're not going to make money on that, but it's the right thing to do, versus big chestnut pieces like the Mozart Requiem, like Carmina Burana, etc. But the pattern is changing, and the things that used to sell don't sell anymore. So we're really making up our marketing plan concert by concert, week by week, just seeing what comes in. It helps that we have a really continuing diversity within our ensemble, both mainly in terms of age. It's kind of incredible how many young people we have, but more and more the look of the Washington Chorus is approaching a little bit more the look of this great city.
Mm. Mm. Now, that I must harken back to the Rachmaninoff Vespers, because I must say that had to be one of my most favorite programs to come to, because I like the idea how you all interpolated the solos and the different piano music within the piece, and then it wasn't so static. So that was a wonderful program. I really liked it, and it engaged the audience also, I must say.
Absolutely. And it's funny because we program the Rachmaninoff Vespers in the same way that everyone's doing that right now. It's like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough money for an orchestra in this budget. Let's do that piece. But instead of just doing that piece, we sort of thought, okay, well, if you were going to listen to that at home, you might, take your iTunes playlist and mix it up a little bit and have a little bit of choral music, a little bit of piano music, a little bit of song. And so it's, I'd have to thank Apple and iTunes for that new way of programming, because I'm doing a lot of that. In the past, we would call it collage programming, but I'm sort of calling it iTunes playlist programming.
But I never thought about it like that. You're right. That's just like pushing the shuffle button on your CD player, and whatever comes out.
Exactly, and also it's like people are in the concert hall, and I'm, I look at them as if they're in my living room, and that's the way I speak from the stage. It's as if I'm just very casual. It's like, hey, thanks for coming over. Here's your glass of wine, and here's what we're going to listen to now. So kind of cool.
Before we move on from the Candlelight concerts, could you maybe give us just a rundown of the schedule of concerts in case people want to come?
Absolutely. We have a Kennedy Center show on Saturday at 4:00, Sunday at 7, and then Tuesday and Thursday. That's the 20th and the 22nd. Those are both Kennedy Center evening programs. On Wednesday, the 21st, we're out at Strathmore, and that's a beautiful hall. And that's that. So those are the 5 shows we're doing. And somehow I got to get back to Lincoln Center for Monday night, which is kind of wild.
We're going to talk about that very shortly. So if you all want to purchase tickets for a Candlelight Christmas with the Washington Chorus, you may visit Kennedy-Center.org, or you may visit Music Center at Strathmore at Strathmore.org. And I want to go to this. He just kind of segued into that. Now I'm going to go right in. Lincoln Center, the Trinity Choir, you had mentioned the word about balance, and we've kind of talked about this before. How in the world do you balance your time between Washington with the Washington Chorus, your time in Trinity with the choir, here, there, and everywhere? How do you do it?
Well, part of it, I keep saying this, part of the way it works is that I have, in Washington, it's very clear what my job is. I'm the music director, and that means I oversee all things artistic, and I have great support staff specifically for music, and all the rest of the operation runs like clockwork from an administrative angle with Diane Peterson, and I don't have to worry about that. It just works. So for me, it's just I come down to Washington and do what I do, which is be a musician. Now at Trinity, it's a little bit different because there I wear the simultaneous hats of artistic director, music director, and executive director. So there, the bulk of the work is administrative, actually, but the music making there is at such a high level that that's the thing that runs very smoothly. And I know that the choir is always going to come through with almost anything we throw at them. The orchestra is world class, and the weekly Bach they've been doing has just been fantastic. So it's that sort of 10 hours of beautiful music making is so enriching that it empowers me. So I'll do a Bach at Monday at 1:00, and by 3:00 I'm on the Acela down to Washington, and I'm still on the high from doing the Bach cantata, and it all kind of works together.
Well, I had a chance to experience that when we had our little road trip. And for the listeners, I embarked on a project called the Wachner Project, where I had the opportunity to follow the maestro. And so Julian had just finished conducting the concert with Elena Rohr, and then he had to get back to New York to conduct Bach at 1, only to have to come back to conduct rehearsals for the Washington Chorus. At that time, they were preparing for some other concerts. So I have seen it at work firsthand, and I must say you do a great job, Ben, in all those things.
And if I remember, you actually witnessed one of our tactical meetings of Music and the Arts administrative staff.
I did indeed. Now, you had talked about Trinity, and I want to make sure that I get this correctly. I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Owen Burdick, your predecessor,
yes,
a week ago, and he had mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, the fact that Messiah received world premiere at Trinity. Is that correct?
It's disputable, but it's pretty sure that in the 1770s. Messiah was performed in its entirety at Trinity, but it's also thought that, a month before at the local tavern it was also performed, and Boston also tries to claim its, you know, it as its own. So it's a little bit nebulous, but let's say for sure that, Trinity Church was responsible for some of the first performances of this great oratorio down in the New World.
Oh wow! Talk
And
to me about
what's great about Owen is,
that's all right.
no, we met for the first time 2 weeks ago, and he's a great guy, and I'm looking forward to actually seeing his Messiah on Sunday. So I'm looking forward to that. I think he's going to be a very good colleague here in Washington.
That's awesome, and it's actually for a good cause. As most people, the listeners may have recalled from that conversation, the organ at the Church of the Ascension in St. Agnes was damaged when sealing residue fell into the lateral organ, which is a very wonderful instrument there. But at any rate, the organ was damaged. So this performance of Messiah at the Church of the Ascension in St. Agnes is also a benefit concert for the organ. So if you're in the Washington area, come join us because Julie and I are attending that as well. So that'd be great. But let's talk about the Trinity Choir's performance of Messiah at Lincoln Center. How did that decision become into being to do that work in that great hall?
Well, one of the things that when I was interviewed and brought into Trinity, the first question is, how are you going to fill our concerts? Because before I got there, they had a concert series of about 6, 7 programs a year, evening programs, half of which with orchestra. So these are, you can already start adding up the dollars in terms of how much these things cost. And other than Messiah, they would get dozens of people to show up, which is, here's a world-class choir, a world-class orchestra. They had great conductors. Jane Glover was there, Andrew Parrott was there, and empty halls. And so the first thing that went in my mind is, well, when I lived in New York as a kid, wild horses wouldn't get me south of Canal Street on an evening. It just wouldn't happen. So, which is actually why we created the whole concept of Bach at One, because of the way this is a little more information than your listeners want, but because of the union regulations, it's possible to do, budget-wise, 8 of those for the same cost of one concert. All right. So, and I walked through St. Paul's Chapel at noon, and I thought, well, gosh, we put up a tent and we're going to have an instant audience, which is exactly what happened. So we did Bach at One, and we're sort of getting an 8-to-1 product quotient ratio there, and packed audiences without really doing any marketing whatsoever. So that's a win-win-win. There's no way to look at that as anything other than an incredible success. But still, what do we do about the fact that the New York Times, Wall Street Journal is not going to come to a noontime liturgical service that has a Bach cantata in it and review it? So that's not going to help the longevity and the long-term growth of the various ensembles of Trinity. So I suggested, why don't we try to bring the music to where the people are, rather than spend $100,000 in marketing to get people to go where they don't want to. Let's go bring our operation up to Lincoln Center. And, really to break even with an added performance of Messiah, you really only need like 50, 60% house, which for Messiah, if you can't sell that, then you shouldn't do it, right? if you can't sell out Trinity Choir doing Messiah at Lincoln Center during Christmas time, when the New York Times says it's the best Messiah in the world. So that was sort of the obvious thinking behind all of it. And, everybody, it doesn't take a lot to see the logic of that. So everyone supported it, and now we'll see how it goes.
Now, are the soloists for the performance drawn from the Trinity Choir, or are you all engaging other soloists?
No, they're all drawn from the choir. We have a choir of solo quality musicians, and they all are soloists. Now, not all are appropriate Messiah soloists, but all are appropriate soloists. So we're really honored and lucky to be able to have this wealth of people that are able to stand out, interpret an aria, and then go back in and be really smart ensemble musicians. just incredible.
Yes, I was honored to come to Bach at one and see the choir at work. And speaking of solos, not to point people out, but I must always say something about Jonathan Woody because he's from the Washington D.C. area. So when I saw him in New York, and then he came to tell me that he went to DeMatha High School, and I was just like, oh wow, and it's such a wonderful voice. And then he went to McGill. I saw all those connections coming together. So yes, you all definitely have some quality voices there.
Absolutely.
I wanted to go a little bit back since talking about hearing the Trinity Choir. Also, I wanted to commend you all on the wonderful series that you all did called Remember to Love during 9/11. I thought that was absolutely wonderful. Could you maybe talk about the genesis of that project, how that came about to invite the different choirs for that?
Absolutely. Let's see. The original concept, again, we have to remember that I am new to the position and that I inherited a lot of programming, a lot of all this. So one of the things I inherited when I got there was the concept of doing Britain's War Requiem, and they had sort of created a budget that would make that piece work. And then of course, I said, well, that's nice, but the Trinity Choir is not exactly big enough to do the Britain War Requiem. so then I said, why don't we build on that and invite choruses from the geographically affected regions, Boston, Washington, and another group in New York, and rural Pennsylvania. And everyone's like, oh, great. So we got that all excited and started planning for that for about 6 months, trying to figure out how to do Britain's War Requiem with all of those groups. And, we were talking about it should be great performances, PBS, et cetera, but the budget to do that well went into the millions because we would have had to have built something outside. We would have had to have contingency plans, the orchestra, the hotels for everyone staying there. So it just got kind of ridiculous. So in other words, in an attempt to keep it more modest, I just thought, well, let's just change that whole concept. We'll do a program together in the evening and then let all these individual groups do performances during the day. So it actually turned into a better program because we had to think outside the box and not just do what would be the obvious thing to a big organization. Like the New York Phil would say, okay, War Requiem, Resurrection Symphony, and period, the end. So it turned into a very creative collaboration with all these organizations, just fantastic. And the programming was created in a way that it could be rehearsed on a single day, and thus we wouldn't need 500 people trying to stay in New York for 4 days for rehearsals and all of that. And everyone, again, as I say over and over again, everyone checked their egos at the door and just made that day brilliant. It was just wonderful.
It really was, and just my brief interactions with some of the conductors and the choirs. I mean, the people were so wonderful, and I have to mention the Young People's Chorus of New York under Francisco Nunez, because just as soon as after we heard them perform at that program, I see them on TV getting recognized at the White House by First Lady Michelle Obama. So that was like, wow, I just heard this choir at Trinity Church. But I also liked how you all used if I'm not mistaken, the Duracell Ubi Caritas, how you all use that piece to tie the whole program together.
Right. Well, that's a bigger concept. That was a sort of church-wide / corporation-wide decision of what is the statement we wanted people to be talking about the week after the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And the focus we looked at was remember to love. So that's what because there's you have to remember that the programming changed for us because when bin Laden was killed, there was a lot of ugliness down in our neck of the woods, in our neighborhood, and it was just at that time that we were putting up sort of finishing touches of the programming, and that really put us all back to square one. And I had to call all of our organizations and be like, you know what, we need to get a focus away from sort of heavy-duty requiems, heavy-duty patriotism, and really look more at this ubi caritas, remember to love concept. And everyone just got on the bandwagon. For instance, we were going to do Dirge for Two Veterans, which is an appropriate piece, great piece, but it really has that war imagery, which is also another reason why we got away from the war requiem. Even though it's a pacifist piece, it has the word war in it. So we wanted to make sure that there was no suggestion whatsoever that we were doing sort of an American patriotic act, or that we were doing anything that had to equate the remembrance of 9/11 with some kind of war on Islam, because that's the language that was going on in Lower Manhattan at the time.
Mm. That is quite something, but it was remarkable how you all pulled that together, and it was such a meaningful program. It wasn't just another performance. It was a presentation that just spoke of excellence, and it really spoke to the hearts and the minds of the people and what they were going through, considering the aftermath of 9/11. So thank you all so much for that. I wanted to now steer a little bit and focus a little bit on you, because most people know that when we interviewed the last time, it was more germane to Candlelight Christmas Concerts, and we did talk about that today. But as a part of the Maestro series, I want to go a little bit further, because in addition to being this wonderful conductor and organist, you're also a great composer. So talk to me a little bit about Come My Dark-Eyed One. How did you feel about the Washington premiere that just happened with the Washington chorus of your work?
Sure. It's ironic because these past 18 months have seen more compositional activity from me than any time the rest of my life. I mean, that weekend that Come My Dark Eyed One was premiered in Washington, I had performances of my music in New York and in Boston. So it's kind of amazing. And on January 15th, a new orchestral disc of my music is coming out on Atma Classique with the Orchestra Metropolitain of Montreal. And my Naxos CD, first volume of complete choral music, came out last year. So it's there's a lot of music coming out, and I'm getting a lot of positive feedback, which feels amazing. And um, when I went into conducting, it was always to support the habit of composition because that's composition is not a way to put bread on the table. So, but more and more, I'm being guided by my friends, colleagues, loved ones to refocus some incredible percentage of my time on that act, just because I think what's coming out for me is touching people, and it's music that 20 years ago was seen as too um, when I was in academic situations, it was seen as being too accessible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and but then for people who are making the music, like, this is really hard. So I think my music really follows a trajectory that comes directly from Leonard Bernstein, The American Experience, and has music that's easy to listen to and music that's a little more challenging to hear, but that it is eclectic. And I think that's one of its qualities that makes it so American. So I'm very happy with where I am as a composer, but part of the challenge, moving forward, is to figure out, okay, does it make sense for me to be sitting in front of an Excel spreadsheet dealing with numbers, or should I be writing, the next piece that's going to actually say something? So that's kind of what's going through my head.
As you compose, do you still harken back to the influence of your late teacher, Lucas Foss?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Lucas, um, because I spent so many years with Lucas, not only as a teacher, which was, at the end of my doctorate at Boston University, my last sort of 3 years was with Lucas, but the time after that, which was as a friend and a colleague, and just showing him music and hearing his stories, because this is a guy who knew, who was sitting next to Bartok when his Concerto for Orchestra was premiered. He knew Stravinsky, he knew Britten, he knew Bernstein, he knew everybody. He was, completely connected in that whole world. And I'm actually still friends with his son and his widow. Where it's still there's this family connection to that group of people. Um, so I feel like like a young member of that school of composition. That there I am. If you were to draw 100 years from now, sort of a lineage chart, I'm right there connected to Lucas and Lenny. And therefore Barber, Ives, and all the other ones. So it's kind of an awesome feeling.
Wow. My first introduction, I will be honest, I wasn't really familiar with the music of Lucas Fox until my mentor in high school gave me a disc called With Heart and Voice, and then with the recording of the Trinity Choir conducted by Brian Jones. And on that disc is an anthem called Behold, I Build an House, and I just was so struck by that piece. So, and then to meet you is like, wow, and then to hear this influence in your music is like, Jesus, like, you're right. It's like a direct line to Lucas.
No, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Just as we wind down and come to the interview, I just want to thank you so much for sharing of your time. And for the listeners, could you just give a snapshot of what coming up with the Washington Chorus beyond the holidays as far as the season?
No, absolutely. In March, we do a collaboration with the National Symphony Orchestra. We do Dvorak's Stabat Mater. In May, we're doing a Wagner program, kind of the Essential Wagner. It's a collaboration with the Wagner Society. The main feature there, I mean, we'll do things like the Ride of the Valkyries, of course, and the Overture to Meistersinger, but the main meat is going to be the finale of Meistersinger. We'll use some of those great Wagnerian singers that Evelyn Lear has been training. And then we have a fantastic world premiere of a piece called Oceanic Verses, which is multimedia. There's video, there's music, there's movement, and that's also at the Kennedy Center. That's the composer is Paola Prestini, and she's a real up-and-comer. I was just at a fundraiser for her in New York last week, and of all people, Philip Glass opened the show, playing a little piece to support her. So that's a major, major coup for us, and that's a piece that's going to continue going up to the River to River Festival in New York and onto the Barbican in the 2013 season. So all good things, and then many, many other things with the Washington Chorus that are not publicly available yet, but summer activities. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, okay, so I'm not going to be a bad press person trying to draw it out of you.
There we go. And now, could I just ask, just for my own curiosity, and maybe for the listeners as well, if people want to listen to this interview on demand, is that possible?
Yes. So once we finish, which will be in a few seconds, you just go to blogtalkradio.com, and then the interview will be populated. It'll be immediately available to be listened to.
Fantastic.
Okay. Again, listeners, we've been listening to conductor Julian Wachner, who is the music director of the Washington Chorus. Julian, thank you so much for joining us today. And just before you go, I do want to remind everybody, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, especially to join the Washington Chorus for a Candlelight Christmas at the Kennedy Center and also at the Music at Strathmore. I will post those exact dates as Mr. Wachner mentioned on the blog so you can follow them. But Julian, thank you so much for joining the broadcast today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a great day.
Wasn't that a great journey back in time? My goodness, you learn so much when you go and listen, to these interviews. It was special for me to do this because today is the Maestro's birthday. Again, happy birthday, Julian Wachner. For those who are just tuning in, I went back into the archives for this special interview that I had around Christmas time, around 2011, 2012, or so forth, with Julian Wachner, because today is his birthday. And as the Washington Chorus approaches its 60th anniversary celebration, I wanted to definitely highlight the whole tradition of the Candlelight Christmas Carol concerts. And as you know, with these times, we just don't know what we're going to have the opportunity to do with COVID and so forth. But I want to also just to share with you all a special announcement. Please tune in to my page on Thursday, this Thursday, tomorrow, at 5 o'clock p.m. as the Washington Chorus streams TWC TV. And I want to show you something that I thought was kind of neat that was posted. And let's see, can I share this with you all? And so this is the announcement. I'm making a cameo appearance on this Thursday at 5 o'clock. So please, please, please be sure to tune in to the Washington Chorus. You can go on their YouTube channel or you can go on their Facebook page, the Washington Chorus. But this is going to be a great show. I'm making a cameo, and I hope you like my little blazer. Making a cameo, and there's going to be a huge announcement. So you don't want to miss that. So be sure to tune in to that. Again, this is Across the Arts. I am Patrick D. McCoy, and you've been listening to the Maestro series in celebration of the birth of American conductor Julian Wachner.
GoGuardian Teacher provides a digital window into student online activity, so teachers can see what students are doing on their device.